Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of OutBüro Voices, where we bring you interesting conversations with LGBTQ professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders from around the world. Today, we have the pleasure and honor to be speaking with Bruce Knotts. He is, if I'm not mistaken, the liaison for the Unitarian Universalist Association to the United Nations. We're going to jump in and let Bruce begin chatting about what the UU is and its role at the United Nations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bruce.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Awesome. And I've been connected with you on LinkedIn for quite some time. And you always have the most interesting posts. At least they resonate with me. And I think we have a lot of shared common mindsets and probably outlooks on lots of different areas of politics and things going on in the world. And that might have something to do with Unitarian Universalism. I too, as I mentioned to you, attended Unitarian Universalist Church for several years out in Long Beach, California. And so for those that aren't aware, and of course, I will be linking down in the description below to the UUA.org site. So we don't have to have a complete lesson here, but could you give the folks who are watching and listening kind of your, your couple of minute brief elevator pitch, so to speak, on what UU is?
Okay, I would like to start by talking about my journey to the UUs. And I grew up in the Church of Christ, went to Pepperdine University, which is a very kind of fundamentalist evangelical church, and certainly was not gay friendly. And I realized as I was studying for the ministry in the Church of Christ that I could never become a Church of Christ minister. And in fact, even today, that would not be possible. So I went on a long journey exploring all kinds of different faiths. And decades down the road, I met a guy by the name of Stephen McDonald, who was head of Dignity in Washington, D.C., which is the gay Catholic organization. And he said, Bruce, you're a very spiritual person. You really should be going to church in a place that would affirm you and your husband. And I said, well, it doesn't exist. I've been to all the churches, all the synagogues, all the mosques, all the temples, and there just ain't no such place. And he said, oh, certainly there is. And I said, well, I really don't want to go to a gay church. I'm not interested in Dignity or MCC. I've been there, but I wanted, something different. And he eventually said, you should try out the Unitarian Universalist Church. So I talked my husband into going. That was a chore, but we wound up going, and it was wonderful. The senior minister at All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. was gay, married, and they had an adopted child. The social justice minister, Louise Green, was also gay, married with an adopted child. And the associate minister, Shauna Lingard, was gay, married, and with an adopted child. So the leadership of a predominantly straight church all looked like us. And in fact, Shauna was African American, my husband's African American. So we saw ourselves reflected in that congregation. And so very quickly we joined and signed the book, which is the way you join a UU church, and felt very welcomed. Little things mattered a great deal. At the very beginning, they put photographs of the new members up on the wall so everybody knows who the new members are. And our photograph was put up as a couple, and that meant a lot to us. We got letters from the church to Bruce Knotts and Isaac Humphrey. So again, they were treating us as a couple, and that small degrees of respect meant a lot to us. And I heard a sermon by Manesh Mishra, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. He calls himself a Hindu or a Hindu Unitarian Universalist, and we're very welcoming to all religious traditions. And he talked about being a Foreign Service officer in the State Department, as I was. He talked about being gay, and he talked about leaving the Foreign Service to become a minister. And I made a beeline to him, and I said, I am really depressed in the State Department. It's getting more homophobic all the time. And he said, quit. I said, just like that, quit? He said, yeah, become a UU minister. Well, I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
become a UU minister, but I did wind up taking the position that represents the Unitarian Universalists at the United Nations. And I'm so glad that I did. The Unitarian Universalists actually started having same-sex commitment ceremonies before 1970.
Wow, I didn't even know that myself, that it was that early. Because if I'll interject here, I also grew up in a fairly right-wing evangelical environment. Grew up, kind of Church of God, Pentecostal, then Assemblies of God that was very different, and they were a prophetic church. So they believed that members, and then of course only a select few members of their congregation literally had direct beeline to the mouth and the ear of God. So how do you argue with that? Because everything they say is as if God is saying it. So it was a little weird. I have been told I could write books about my upbringing, and it wasn't all about me being gay, but of course, once I did come out, then a lot of the mass majority of all of that BS got kind of, targeted toward me. And still to this day, I have a very contentious relationship with my father and his wife over it. And so I had a lot of, and I'm very spiritual myself. I would consider myself kind of like your friend, kind of more of a Buddhist UU. I very much believe in the personal path, and that's something I think is why the UU Church is so, and the UU faith is so interesting, as well as welcoming to the LGBT community. And I think a place where a lot of people who are spiritual in the LGBTQ community can find some level of peace within the UU faith, because as you mentioned kind of very briefly, is that the UU faith respects all world faiths and religions and non. So you can actually be atheist and attend a UU church. Yes, as atheists, you are welcome.
We have lots of atheists, lots and lots.
Yeah.
We're very close to the ethical humanists. They're kind of at our right hand, and they tend to be atheist or agnostic, and many are in our churches would identify as atheist or agnostic. And then we have, you mentioned Buddhism, the sort of the joking phrase we use for them are boo yous. So you can be a boo you, you can be a Hindu you can be whatever. We're also a great place for mixed marriages. So if one partner is a Hindu and the other partner is a Catholic, where are they going to go to church? They can come to our church, and both faiths would be respected.
Oh, that's a really great point.
And yeah, we
And
have a lot of what I would call mixed couples in that way.
very interesting, because that can be sometime a point of, discord in relationship. I've, even have had straight friends who have had, that issue. And, what I also found interesting is the history of the UU faith, because it was new to me. And one is, you brought up all the adoptions too. One of the things too that my ex and I were, I wanted to get back into some form of faith to begin to heal myself and have some reconciliation, over that all spiritual people aren't basically trying to destroy your life, is how I felt for a long time. I actually, just to give everyone the perspective, that for years, and I still say Gesundheit, for years, being a consultant, it was so bad that if I were walking into a client and someone had a bunch of religious paraphernalia at their desk, I basically would stay away from them as much as possible. When people would sneeze, it would be, for me, Gesundheit. And if people would say, God bless you, or would wear crosses and stuff, you know, hey, some Christian folks really take it, they wear it on their sleeves, talking about pushing it down your throat. Sorry, folks out there, but my perspective. And so the UU congregation in Long Beach was one where I could be sitting right next, as you indicated, sitting right next to someone who identified as Christian at a UU church. Right next to, right in front of me, someone who identifies as Muslim. Right next to that person, someone who identified as Muslim. And let me tell you, there, I'm sure is in your congregation as well. What was so awesome is too, that's how the services go. So one Sunday it'll be, you know, around the holidays, around the year and so forth, for all the different faiths. You know, in May, you're celebrating the pagan May Day and dancing around a pole and doing the ribbons and so forth. And it's so much fun. And, you know, exploring the metaphysical properties of crystals. Then the next Sunday, you're talking about the something in the Buddhist faith, and just the diversity of that kept it interesting. You know, it just, although what I found is that so many of the stories, there's that common thread, you know, like, you know, that common human thread, those common stories that I really didn't realize are throughout most of the religions. Names are changed, sometimes places are changed, but basically the overall stories are very similar. And I think that really helped me as an LGBT person who grew up in a very evangelical right-wing environment where religion was used in a very harmful and detrimental way. So
Let me tell you my witch story. I'll make it as brief as I possibly can, but it'll be funny. So I was on my way to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly in Salt Lake City, and I get on the plane and I sit next to this woman, and she said, "Hi, are you going to the UUA General Assembly?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, my name is Jean and I'm a witch." I said, "Okay, very happy to meet you." So we land in Salt Lake City and we get on the hotel limousine, and she gets off at the Hilton and I head to the Motel 6. And I saw her later and I said, "How comes you're at the Hilton and I'm at the Motel 6? And she says, "Well, I have powers." I said, "Okay, all right." So we go through the assembly and we get on the flight going back to New York City. And she's sitting next to me again. And I said, "How is it you're sitting next to me again?" And she says, "I have powers." I said, "Okay, fine." So we come back. She lives in Danbury, Connecticut. She lives with a bunch of other women who also identify as witches. They're all artists. They're beautiful, wonderful people, paintings and crystals and all the beautiful things. And they invite Isaac, my husband, and I to a birthday party. And I said, "This is great, wonderful. We're going to have the birthday party," they said, "on the deck outside." And I said, "You know, the weather report says that it's going to rain today." And they said, "No, no, no. We prayed to the goddess that it wouldn't rain." So we go outside on the deck, and sure enough, it starts raining. And I said, "What happened to the goddess?" And they said, "She's a bitch."
Oh, too funny. Too funny. So we'll throw in there, yes, Unitarian Universalists are also open to paganism.
Yes.
So earth loving, you know, folks. So all the tree huggers and folks who would like to, you know, just explore the UU faith. It's welcoming, and so as you can hear from our little stories here, it's very welcoming to all faiths. And therefore also all of the potential, you know, damage and baggage that those potential religions that were forced on you with good intentions. Okay, so let me get that clear. You know, my the people in my life who has used religion harmfully didn't do so intentionally. They did it with the best intentions because that's what the Bible told them, or that's the way that they interpreted the Bible, or the way that they were told the Bible intended it to be. Okay, so we still have those. We still have had those conversations, but blood has been shed around the world with the best of intentions and in the name of God's and so forth, and lives have been destroyed and harm has been done also. So if you happen to be also spiritual or wanting to possibly reconnect with your side, consider looking at the Unitarian Universalist church and faith, because again, it will accept you, who you are, where you are, and on your own journey. No one's going to force you into one thing or the other. And what's so beautiful is you get to take and build your own spiritual practice and take little bits from this and little bits from that and little bits over here and pull it all together into what makes sense for you. And as you will also find in some of the history, is some very prominent Americans, if you happen to be listening and watching in the United States, but around the world, is some very prominent U.S. Founders were also UU. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me, Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson, yes. John Adams, John Quincy Adams. Probably the last Unitarian president we had was William Howard Taft. And Barack Obama's maternal grandmother was a Unitarian. And if you remember, right at the beginning of his administration, he went to Hawaii for his grandmother's funeral. And that was a Unitarian Universalist funeral for his grandmother.
Wonderful.
Gene Roddenberry, the author and founder of Star Trek, was a Unitarian Universalist. And we actually have courses in our religious education based on Star Trek, because Star Trek does sort of relay an optimistic view of the future where diplomacy and cultural diversity is praised and honored. So yeah, lots of us around.
Absolutely. Before we segue on to kind of wrap this episode up, and be sure to click up here when you get the moment to check out the next episode, and where we're going to talk about the Unitarian Universalist Association at the UN, and where Bruce is the leader there. But one last note here is what I just so much enjoy about the UU faith and going to the services is just the diversity in, the people, typically the education of the people. You're typically dealing with folks who have or desire a higher level of understanding of the world around them. And so lots of folks with very prestigious degrees typically sitting right next to you. And you don't have to have that same degree. It's not an exclusive club. But if you are the type of person, no matter where you are in your journey, you're going to be surrounded by folks in who you can aspire to be. And one of the things that I absolutely thoroughly enjoy about a UU service is the diversity in the delivery. So at the one in Long Beach, we could have basically what I would call a poetry jam, where some Sundays everyone was encouraged to bring their favorite poetry, and people would just take turns reading poetry, right? Because again, the UU believe that all of that is an inspiration of the higher power and the creator, and therefore, for example, one Sunday, all the music was one of my favorites, Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah. Yes. So I absolutely adore Simon and Garfunkel. Wish music was made more like them today. Then we'd be singing Wham. I mean, just all kinds of, music from the Beatles and all the way up to, you know, contemporary pop music even. So, so at any rate, can you see the smile on my face, people, right? So if you want to smile when you talk about a faith, right? Not in the LGBT community, you know, so often when people, you know, start talking about a religion, which I really don't kind of consider UU is, because it's an amalgamation of all, but, you know, kind of using the same terminology, you know, so many people have been to some level damaged or kind of looking for something new. So, so one huge shout out for the Unitarian Universalists. Check them out. So, so Bruce, thank you so much for giving us your perspective and your your overview. And again, we're going to have the links down below to the uu.org. And I again encourage all of you to check it out. Stay tuned. Up next, we're going to be talking about the UU Association and Bruce Knotts at the UN. Click right up here to see that next.